And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. Got a great show in store for you this evening, and my guest is Scott Wheeler. Welcome, Scott, to Let Them Talk.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on.
Thanks.
Scott's a composer, and we're going to be talking about his latest CD, which just came out, and the live concert CD release event that's happening next week, and we'll be playing a video and seeing the work that he does, and it looks very beautiful. I know we have a lot of classical music, dance, and arts aficionados who watch our show. We're not just all about politics and all those like dreary things. We like to talk about the arts and about the creative work that happens in New York, and in this case, New York and Boston, and we'll be talking about that, right? So, Scott, welcome, and
Thank you.
Here's your CD. And we'll be talking more about it. Here's Scott Wheeler, Portraits and Tributes. And it's got Donald Berman on piano, right? And this is your works written, I guess, between 1977 and 2014. Right?
Yes.
All right, great. So tell us a little bit about, here you can hold it if you want, tell us a little bit about your CD and what it represents to you.
Well, I think of this CD as a kind of musical autobiography. I'm a pianist, and yet I've never been a concertizing pianist, like giving full recitals. So I write smaller pieces that I might play or that friends might play. And over the years, I've been collecting them, little pieces that always have to do with some particular person. And that's why these are portraits and tributes, because either it's a portrait of a person or it's a piece written for a person. A tribute would be, for instance, when my teacher and mentor Gunther Schuller turned 60, I wrote a piece for him. And since Gunther had been involved with ragtime a lot, I called it a pseudo-rag. Gunther Schuller is GS, are his initials, so I decided to use 60 measures for his 60 years and have it all based on the notes G and E flat, which is a musical spelling, classic musical spelling of S.
GS, so that's GS in music terminology.
Yes, GS in music becomes GE flat. And I said, oh, you know what that is? Da 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 da, the entertainer. So I built in the entertainer, and then at the very end I inverted it, so the G to E flat became da 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 da, and it became When I'm 64.
Okay.
You
aged him 4 years.
I gave him an extra four years. He died last year at 91 or something like that. He lasted a long, long time. So that was a 1985 tribute. Another one that I did for a famous mentor is Stephen Sondheim. When Steve got the McDowell Medal, I wrote a piece in his honor based on a song called By the Sea, which is from Sweeney Todd. And the subtitle is Anything You Say, which I thought was a nice thing to say for Steve, but is in fact what Sweeney Todd sings to Mrs. Lovett when she sings the song. So I created a kind of Candace.
He was a serial killer, right?
Yes. He was the barber who would murder his clients, and Mrs. Lovett would take the bodies and bake them into meat pies.
Of course, you had to write a song to her, right? Yeah.
So he wrote a song. She had this dream of them going off and having a vacation by the sea, and he's totally distracted because he wants to get the judge who did his wife in. And
so you wrote that song?
So I wrote a treatment of Steve's song By the Sea, and I gave it to him as a tribute to him when he got this McDowell Award. Anyway, so the other ones, for instance, for Donald Berman, I wrote a piece that was for his wedding, and it's called Epithalamion, which is a Greek wedding hymn, and it quotes from a klezmer wedding tune about the bride. Others, there's one called Firefly Lullaby, which I wrote for my niece when she was born. I gave it to my brother, and she's going to be at the concert, actually. She's now an undergraduate at Wesleyan.
Well, we're going to be seeing some of your material. I'm fascinated by it. And just let you go on and on.
So all of the people from my life are in this CD. That's what the tributes are. Anthony Tomasini writes for the New York Times, a classical critic. I wrote a 50th birthday piece for him, 50 bars, and it's based on Virgil Thompson's portrait of Tony. Portraits are another matter. Virgil Thompson was my teacher, and he wrote portraits in the manner of the visual artists that he was friends with. people like Maurice Grosser or Picasso or in a way Gertrude Stein. And the way he did them was from life. That is, the portrait sitter would sit and Virgil would write the piece at the time. He did one of me, and eventually I got the nerve up to try to do it myself. And it's a very tricky thing to do because you're on the spot and this is your time to write a piece. And I don't do it at the piano or anything like that. We don't talk. The person just sits there.
How do you write if it's not at the piano? You're not at
I
the,
write
like
on
that
I write on music paper.
on music paper.
Yeah, I just
so
know
it's
what it
going
sounds
through-
like. Yeah,
you
I'm
know what it
listening
sounds
to
like.
it. I'm listening to it, and I say, well, why don't I write this? And I mean, I don't write at the piano anyway.
Right.
I use the piano, but
Like in the movies. I mean, you know.
you just so yeah, no, you hear
you're not
you
there
hear
ding,
what
ding,
it is
ding.
in your head,
Right, okay.
and you write it out, and it's a sketch, and it's an
Are you
improvisation
natural?
of a sort.
I mean, were you a natural when you were a child? I mean, did you?
I don't have absolute pitch or any of those things. I wasn't a prodigy or anything like that, but I think anybody who goes into music was probably pretty sensitive to it early on, and I'm sure that I was. I certainly always loved
What made
music.
you go into music? What directed you into it? Was your family into it? Did your dad or mom push you?
No,
into it?
my parents are very musical, but they certainly didn't exactly encourage it as a profession. They encouraged it as a hobby. When I gave up pre-med as an undergraduate and said I want to be a professional musician, that was not a popular choice from my parents' point of view. But their friends used to always come around to see me and say, "Oh, you've given up pre-med and you're going to do music." And they had so many of them used to say, "But music is such a wonderful hobby for a doctor." And eventually I learned to respond. I didn't think of it the first time, but eventually I said, "Oh, I'm not planning to give up medicine. I'm planning to keep it as a hobby." And somehow the people who said that never thought that was funny.
Right, I think it's funny. It's hysterical.
I thought it was wonderful.
I think it's hysterical. Thank you for saying that. So tell us where this event is going to be taking place. It's going to be on the next week, the 15th, Wednesday,
Yes.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. at National Sawdust, which is at
80 North 6th Street.
80 North 6th Street in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. It's on the L.
The L train right at Bedford Avenue. Get out of Bedford, walk over to the North 6th, and it's at 80 North 6th.
There it is. Anyway,
and it's 7 p.m.
Yes.
And it's next Wednesday.
It's a wonderful, wonderful performance space run by a good friend of mine named Paola Prestini, who is the artistic director there.
Great, great. And they have a website where you can go and find out details about
NationalSawdust.org.
National
has
Sawdust.
the tickets and all the information there.
Why do they call it National Sawdust? Is there a reason?
I think it might have been a converted factory.
Sort of assuming.
Actually, I'm guessing that's what it
or a bar, an old saloon.
I don't know if they made sawdust or only by accident made sawdust.
Okay, could be. Right, so National Sawdust. Great. So we have a video actually that shows a performance of some of your work. Right. What are we about to see?
Well, this is actually a documentary. It's a trailer from a documentary made by Fern Lopez about the recording of this CD. So you'll hear a lot of the music, and you will see Donald Berman playing, and you'll hear interviews with some of the portrait subjects. This all took place up in Boston about a year ago in July of 2015.
And we didn't mention that besides living in New York, you teach in Boston.
Yes, I do.
At Emerson College.
Yes, I do.
And you teach music or composing?
I'm in musical theater.
Musical theater.
Yeah, which is one reason I know Steve Sondheim so well, because I know every note of his.
Okay, great.
And I teach it.
All right, wonderful. All right, so let's go to the video, and then we'll come back and talk some more. So here we go. is represented by April, and she's often a guest here.
Oh,
Usually around Christmas time.
Okay.
Oh, isn't there more?
Yes, there should be more.
There should be more. Oh.
That was the 1 minute clip. There's a 10-minute
there should be a
one.
10-minute one.
There's a
Sorry about
10-minute
that.
clip.
Sorry about that error. We'll come back to it in a minute. So
Great.
All right, but that's the beginning. What did that show in that first minute?
It showed the recital hall where we did the recording, and it showed Don playing some of a piece of mine called Flowchart. When Don commissioned that piece for a recital, and when I first told him about the title, he said, "I know what a flowchart is. It's a computer term, and it doesn't. You don't mean that I have choices that I have to make, like some avant-garde pieces." And I said, "No. I made the choices. You just follow the music as it is." But it does go from place to place in a way that seems to flow. Like, if we're here, should we go here? Yes, let's go here. But no, actually, we need to go back to this and rethink it.
Exactly. We need to go back to this and rethink it. Thank you very much.
The earliest known portrait is a 27,000-year-old sculpture. Since then, from cave paintings to the masterpieces of Van Dyck and Rembrandt, portraits have taken many forms: sculpture, drawing, painting, and a distinct visual tradition has been established. The subject typically looks directly at the viewer with an arresting stare. But have you ever heard a portrait? Hi, Don.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Thank you for talking to us. We know you've had a long 3 days. Can you tell us just how it's gone?
It's gone well. You know, it's a lot of preparation that goes into those 3 days, but I was ready for it.
You were ready?
Yeah. So we did an awful lot of work.
Can you take us back to sort of when you met Scott and how you met him? And
Yeah. I moved to Boston in 1986.
Don and I have been working together for actually about 30 years.
Whoa.
I met him when he was a student.
I think first recollections was really the whole family.
Really?
Kristen Frothingham, his wife, they came to All Saints Parish in Brookline, where I was the soprano soloist.
In my part of the world, Harvard Square, we like to say we live in a village, and it's just inevitable that Scott and I would meet.
I first met Scott, I think, through Don. Don suggested that I produce Scott's opera.
Oh.
It was called The Construction of Boston.
Well, I've known Scott for a very long time, like decades, and we kind of bonded about Amherst College because my husband had taught at Amherst College. And we were there before, and I knew some of his professors.
Oh, I know exactly how I met him.
Yeah?
It was around the time of the financial crisis, around 2008.
Okay.
And I was giving a speech sponsored by the Women's Bond Club in New York. So after the speech, a woman started speaking to me and said, "You have to meet my friend Scott." Well, it turns out that was the pianist, Donald's wife.
It was a long time ago. I had just
Really?
gotten out of Harvard. I graduated, and a friend of mine was singing in the Cambridge Chorale, which kind of had turned into a women's chorus at the last minute,
wow.
I think, and Scott Wheeler was conducting it.
When I got married, he wrote us, me and my wife, a wedding piece, and it was the perfect piece because it has, you'll hear it's an epithalamion, which I had to look up too. It's a Greek lyric ode to the bride.
But Scott points out, or he has this inner clock that is atomic.
A tad brighter is fine, and if you can, but otherwise it's okay where it is. That's better. That's good. Yes. Yep. It's gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. No 44, please, no ripped. Let's check tempos at this little transition stuff here. Steady, absolutely steady rhythm, please. That's too fast. No. Yeah. 35 is in tempo, 36 a cello as written, please. So that's good, but check it. 66, no a cello at 49, please. Beautiful. A lot of great stuff there, Don.
My role is to create the right atmosphere for the artists to do their best. And then I'm also reading the score and making sure that things are right, but and that the performance is engaging.
Of course.
Those are the principal things that I'm doing.
I learned to write portraits through my teacher, Virgil Thompson, who did them from life, and along the lines of his painter friends and people like Picasso. And many of them were doing sort of abstract paintings and modernist things. This is Paris in the 20s when he started doing this.
Sure.
And the idea that a portrait had to be a literal likeness was not really necessary. He also suggested, he said, you know, all of those pieces in the Well-Tempered Clavier of Bach, those melodies are so different from each other. He said, I can't prove it, but I bet they're portraits.
When did musical portraits start to become something that you were aware of that he did, and when did you become familiar with that?
I was aware of them, and he sent me the first book, and I tucked it away in the pile.
Sure. But what was it like sitting for him? How long did you sit?
I was astonished at the process. I thought we would meet in his office and he would ask me what my favorite dessert was or something.
Right.
But it was
Getting to
not
know you.
like that.
Doesn't it help that you have known me? Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, it's right at the moment, Nan.
It was interesting in that he really did follow a procedure that is more, I think, what we would do for a quick sketch if you were a portrait artist.
When preparing for a musical portrait, are they unique in sort of from other kinds of music?
Yeah, I did ask about the people. Yeah, he never would tell me, but occasionally I'd ask him. The stories were always so interesting.
Has it ever been difficult?
I've never had any trouble because I've always had nice people that I was working with. Virgil complained that there were a couple of times when he couldn't get a portrait done.
When you heard the premiere by Don in New York, what was that like for you?
Well, it was funny. I was there with three people who know me well, my girlfriend, two friends of mine. My initial reaction, I loved the piece.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great writing piece, but I thought, God, am I really that moody?
Yours and mine are the only ones that end loud. Yes. I don't know what that says.
Scott's portrait played twice
Played twice.
as your pictures came up over and over.
That's right, right.
It stopped at 109 for any particular reason?
Oh, well, my goal was to do 100, but I wasn't quite finished. So. But then when I got to 9, you know, it wasn't 10, so I was done.
The steadiness, the steadfast friendship, maybe. I don't know what was Scott. You know, I don't know what was in his mind, but there's that made me feel loved.
Do you think the portrait sounded like you?
Well, you know, I almost think that's the wrong question. Gets kind of climactic and then falls away to what I hear is kind of almost a chorale, a vocal experience, a choral experience. And I hear that very much too at the end of the piece, which is just absolutely beautiful.
And it's like that.
Was it tough to form an opinion?
Oh, in fact, I had kind of an insightful moment in that I really think this portrait thing is the real deal. I really feel that that's a portrait. I mean, that does happen to be
Really? You?
me.
Wow, beautiful. Very nice. So that we were just listening to a documentary about the work of Scott Wheeler, whose CD Portraits and Tributes is coming out next week, Wednesday, at the Sawdust?
National Sawdust.
National Sawdust, right? Tell us a little, where is it going to be? This is the composer you saw.
I was interviewed
numerous times.
A little bit here, and we're interviewing again now.
Okay.
Yes.
So a couple more minutes. So tell us again, this is next week, Wednesday.
Wednesday the 15th, June 15th at National Sawdust in Brooklyn.
That's 80 North 6th Street.
Yes, in Brooklyn on the L train.
You get out at Bedford, right?
Bedford.
Right there. So for folks who want to get there.
Great.
And nationalsawdust.org is the website.
Is where to buy tickets.
And find out about it. Great. And so, Scott, tell us a little bit about what we were just seeing there.
Well, we were focusing on the portrait aspect of things as opposed to the tributes, and the portraits have come about in various ways. The thing about it is that, as Nancy Armstrong said, does it help that we've known each other for years? And I said, no, it doesn't matter. In fact, I've done perfectly good portraits of people I met at that moment. The first time I met them, we just sit down, and it's not about how you look, it's about what musical ideas seem to come to mind if I try to channel the person I'm with.
I noticed you did have, we saw some visual art, some actual portraits that were actually presented, and that's on your website. Yeah.
That was Shane Crabtree, one of my portrait subjects, was somebody who herself does self-portraits. So since I had a musical portrait of her and she had a set of 109 self-portraits, she put it together as an event, and my portrait of her played a couple of times around while she showed a series of these fascinating, varied self-portraits that she did.
Yeah, they're all her in different ways, different moods, different times.
Yes.
Right, very interesting. And she, so again, talking about these musical portraits, it's interesting to me. So sometimes you just see the person and you get an idea. Other times you base it on their age.
No. If I base it on their age, like the Gunther Schuller 60, that's not a portrait.
Okay.
That's a tribute.
All right.
That's usually based on some other music.
Okay.
Which is a very different matter, and it's usually very, very well structured, like 60 measures and fill them up, or 80 measures for Arthur Berger, and for Arthur Berger it's AB is his initials, so I use those notes, etc. That's the kind of thing that a tribute would be. or the wedding piece for Don, which is based on this klezmer wedding tune. Typically, they're based on some previous music in some way. A portrait is more like an improvisation, but it's an improvisation that's done very slowly on paper. It's like engraved improvisation. If you were doing improvisation in a stylus that couldn't be changed.
Do you have to know the person well, or can you just do it by looking at them, or you could do it by knowing a little bit about them?
By being with them. No, you don't have to know anything about them.
So by being with them, you actually are writing while you're there, looking at them or talking to them?
We're not talking. I'm writing.
So it's totally like, but it's based on a visual, so it's an audio version.
I don't think it's really visual. I think it's something else. I think it's this. I mean, we all know that we have many, many ways that we see each other, that we feel who we are to each other without use of words. And they're not necessarily visual things. We're probably getting them visually, but how do you characterize somebody in music? How is somebody ever characterized in music? It's an interesting question, and this portrait business gets straight to it. It says, let me see what am I getting from the character of the person in front of me. And I've had very senior people who were in their 70s and 80s.
Have you ever had anybody who didn't like it? He said, that's not me.
Yeah, nobody's exactly complained in that way. I think people have been confused and wonder, is that me?
Right, because portraits are like that.
Others, but I think that's probably true in the visual arts too.
Yes.
But in this case, mostly people say, oh, wow, that's interesting. You got something about me there. I don't know. In any case, when I was working with Virgil Thompson, who did these things, he said, if you're ever stuck and you don't have enough ideas, do a few portraits. That'll get you going.
All right, great. Thank you, Scott Wheeler, for joining us, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Thanks very much.